Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. This is Season 5, Episode 3 of the podcast. Today's guest is Ben Shearon. Ben is a retired university English teacher based in Sendai, Japan. He was born in Germany and grew up in Spain, but claims to be British. After living in Spain, the UK and China, he moved to Japan in 2000 and has been there ever since. In 2013, Ben started the Retire Japan website to share information in English about personal finance, investing and retirement for people living in Japan. It has since grown into an online community with a forum, newsletter and YouTube channel, and a number of publications and courses. I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hey everyone, buckle up for a new episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, the one and only podcast made to help you launch your business or take your existing business to a level of success you could never have imagined. Whether you're a school owner, freelancer, publisher, or other entrepreneur, you're sure to pick up lots of actionable advice when you listen to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Remember to visit eflmagazine.com for great articles and features. Without further ado, here's your host, the founder of EFL Magazine, Philip Pound.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, and I'm delighted today to have Ben Shearon with me, and Ben is currently unemployed. Is that right, Ben?
It depends on how you look at it. So I finished working at the end of March. My contract ran out and my employer decided not to renew it, and that was fine. So according to my wife, I'm unemployed and she would rather I wasn't. But I keep myself busy doing kind of various projects and kind of side things that I have on. So,
okay, so well, let's what is it? In media res, we kind of started there. So we'll go a little bit back. And where are you today, Ben?
Right.
Ben, where are you? Where do you reside?
So I'm in Sendai, and I've been here for 22 years. So I came here on the JET program. They decided to send me to Sendai. I'd never heard of it. I had to look it up on a map because we didn't really have the internet back then. And but it turned out to be a great kind of piece of luck to be sent here because, in my opinion, Sendai is the best place to live in Japan.
Okay, when people hear of Sendai, I think it became famous across the world, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Yes.
Before that, no one had ever heard the word before, and now they've heard the word, but they've probably forgotten where they heard it.
So tell me a little bit about your earthquake experience, where you were and what happened.
I was here in my wife's school, so we were waiting for a kindergarten class to start, and I'm really pleased that the earthquake was at 2:46 or whenever it was, because the class would start at 3:30 and we'd have had all these little 5-year-olds in the room, and that wouldn't have been fun. So we had the earthquake. As you know, it was for like 5 minutes long. It was incredible. Like, I've never experienced that before. And it kind of, built. And then there was this kind of sideways jerk at the end and everything flew. So, desks and computers and TVs and everything was just flying through the air. And we went outside. It was snowing, which felt a bit mean, to be honest. It started snowing just after the earthquake. And then, went home that night, no electricity. And then the following day, I got a couple of phone calls from Europe, which was weird because the phone network was down. But it seemed that it worked internationally somehow. But and they were like, yeah, Fukushima looks bad. You should probably do something. And I was like, oh, we had no idea about anything. So, I mean, we didn't even know there'd been a tsunami.
Oh,
people in Sendai.
Oh,
so everyone else was watching it live on TV, but, we didn't have electricity. So we didn't really have any kind of, real information about things. And we basically decided to leave. So the Friday was the earthquake. The Saturday night, we kind of packed up the cars and left, possibly for good. And we drove to Kanazawa, which is just across the mountains on the other side of Japan, and stayed with relatives for about a month and then came back.
And you had to dust yourselves off. Japan is, famous for getting back to business. I mean, there's the story about the guy who I think it was in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. He was actually at both bombs, but the
He
day
took the train
after,
to I heard that
you
one.
know that story. Yeah, so it's and of course we see the memes, don't we, of this is my country and this is Japan when there's an earthquake like after 3 days. Was it very much like that things got back to normal pretty?
Yeah, I was so impressed with how the government and society at large reacted to things. Everyone kind of, it's kind of a cliche, but the community kind of came together and kind of supported each other, and yeah, it was great. So I think the electricity was back on about 10 days later. They fixed the highways in like 2 days. That was quite famous, right? So they get things in and out. Our rental house had to be demolished, so we had to move out. It was structurally damaged by the second quake. So there's another quake in April that did more damage. Didn't cause a tsunami, so it didn't have the casualties, but it probably did more damage to the buildings and things. And then, the school was up after, 6 weeks, maybe.
Okay, yeah, but still, a long delay, isn't it? Waiting around. So we'll come back to that. There's so many things I want to talk about, Ben. I mean, I sometimes don't know where to start, but I think we've been kind of in touch and connected over the years, and I've been reading your posts. Actually, you have a bigger head of hair in your pictures. You're a little bit bosan.
Yeah.
At the moment,
this is my preferred. Yeah, I like to basically have very short hair. I started cutting it myself after COVID started, and I'm never going back. Just being able to do it in 5 minutes, in the shower is such a time saver rather than more than anything else. Yeah. And my wife hates it, so. Whenever it gets longer, she's like, your hair's really nice and I want you to keep it like this, and then a few days later it's all gone again. She's like, so
yeah, to grow a beard, you'll save even more time and money as well. Maybe that's my finance tip for today is grow a beard and save money. But
don't have to buy razors anymore.
Exactly. It's a kind of a what loss leader model, isn't it? I remember buying the razors and it's so cheap, but then the actual blades
are where they make the money. Yeah, it's the subscription style.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. I was I normally don't read people's LinkedIn profiles. It's just I think it's kind of rude. It's not rude. It just seems a bit intrusive, I think, because you can get I don't know. I would
unless you're considering them for a job or something.
Yeah, exactly. So because generally I actually don't even look at who looks at my profiles, but I see the little number in the corner, but I feel like it's like this person's been looking at your profile. It seems a little bit creepy. I don't know. That's my opinion, but I had a little look at your profile, Ben, and I see you have your love for Japan is a long one. I think you studied Oriental studies back in the day. Is that right?
I did, but I studied Chinese.
Okay.
So it's quite funny. I got tricked by the Chinese professor. We had an open day for Oriental studies. I don't think they call it that anymore. It's probably like East Asian studies now.
Yeah, it's kind of not PC anymore, is it? To say Oriental?
Apparently, yeah. So I went in, and all the language kind of representatives gave a little presentation about why you should study their language. And the Japanese professor stood up and said, well, yeah, as you know, Japanese is, a very interesting culture, but the language is quite difficult. There's 3 writing systems. And the grammar is somewhat complicated. And I was like, that doesn't sound particularly fun. And then the Chinese guy stood up and said, Chinese is so easy. Look at this. And he showed like tree, the kanji for tree, which looks like a tree. And he's like, this is tree. And then he showed 2 of them. And he said, this means wood, like more trees. And then he showed 3 and he said, this is forest. And that is how easy Chinese is. And I was like, okay. And it was a total lie. I mean, Chinese is really difficult. So I ended up doing 3 years of Chinese. And then in my final year, I changed to social and political studies because I just wasn't going to get a good degree with Chinese.
Okay. So you were tricked. It's the classic Japanese...
Bait and switch is what I call that.
Yeah. But Japanese tend to undersell themselves, and maybe Chinese. I don't know. Is that why there's so many Chinese in Yokohama? Because the Japanese were not so good at doing business with foreigners. But
Probably.
yeah. But the Chinese were. I mean, if you go to, because I lived in China as well, it's it'd be Japanese tend to.
Yeah, whereabouts?
I lived in Qingdao.
Oh, nice. I studied
did you
there. That's where my
that's
year
right.
abroad was.
I remember now. Yeah, you sent me a message, didn't you? We were a few years back, I think, and you said you studied in, was it Ocean University or Qingdao University?
That's right. Yeah,
because Ocean
high-end
University is,
right?
Like, yeah, exactly. It's slightly higher. It's higher level than Qingdao University.
I mean, I didn't study there. We were kind of in a room on the edge of campus, by ourselves. Like, it's very much the study abroad program because our professor had a connection to it. But
it was interesting. What year was this, Ben?
This was in 1999.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was there about 2010 to 2012.
Okay, so completely different country at that point.
Absolutely. I mean, they had the whole harbor was redeveloped, and they have like Hisense Plaza, and
wow.
I'm sure back then it was just countryside, was it?
It was, yeah. I mean, the highlight of my week was going to Jusco. Like, there was a Jusco, and they had like
Jusco was there
bakery.
Back then.
Yeah.
Okay. On Shangang-lu, is that right? On Hong Kong Road?
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember much about it, apart from being really cold and going to Jusco every so often.
Yeah. Yeah, the winters are pretty cold. And at nighttime, it's like minus 15. And
and like no heating, and you can have a shower for half an hour a day. That was we were still in that kind of thing, and we were so much better off than Chinese students because they could have a shower once a week. Like,
yeah, and it's so changed now. There's a metro in Qingdao now. They were building.
Way.
Yeah, there is. They were building it when I was there, and I've seen some of the reels of it. It looks really impressive. I think it goes all the way to what's the shopping district in the north called? Oh, okay, not Shenyang, and Lichang. Is it Lichang? I could never get that sound in Japanese. The song sound very difficult. The taxi drivers, when because I worked in this place Lichang, and I had to write it down in kanji because they're like and then they speak dialect, and if you speak Putonghua to them, they get angry that you don't know their dialect, and it's not always Qingdao. They have there's slightly different dialects as well. So wasn't easy, but enjoyed it. I mean, the beer,
I always said it was interesting rather than enjoyable.
Oh, okay.
Maybe being in China,
at that time,
it was fascinating, and it was challenging, and it was kind of cool, but it wasn't fun most of the time.
I suppose when I was there, I had mod cons and central heating and, shopping centers and foreign supermarkets. So there was a Japanese supermarket, Korean supermarket. And
what?
Yeah. Maybe back then you just had the cup of ramen or something. I don't know.
We had this little restaurant that we hung out in where the owner was, really nice to us, and a couple of bars. And we could only go to the bars when the Korean businessman took us, because we didn't have any money. So
okay. Yeah. Jack's Bar. Do you remember that place? Was that open at the time? That's kind of the expat bar, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a few, yeah. But anyway, yes, so you moved from there, and then you decided to come to Japan on the JET program. Did I get
this was my backup.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be a spy. That was the plan. I actually had some interviews with the Secret Intelligence Service. It's MI6, and they said, go to Japan, we like this, go to Japan, and then when you come back we'll talk to you again, and I never went back. So.
Okay, wow.
And that's probably a good thing, because when I did the interviews, it was very much MI6 was spying on China, basically, commercially mostly. And then we had the war on terror, and it turned into a very different kind of job that I probably wouldn't have enjoyed very much.
But then there was a lot of murky spy intrigue, political shenanigans in China with the British executive, wasn't it, for GSK? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're probably right not to be involved in any of that. Yeah. I can hardly remember the complete details, but it's like something from a novel, isn't it? Back then. But yeah, so you moved to Japan. You decided to be from being a MI6 operative to a kindergarten teacher.
ALT, yeah.
From the sublime to the well. Anyway, yeah. So that was quite a pivot, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I never wanted to be a teacher. My mum was a teacher, and I looked at her and I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't want to do that." But I met my wife within about 2 weeks of getting to Japan. And well, obviously she wasn't my wife at that point, but she ended up being my wife, and that's basically why I stayed. And being in Sendai, there wasn't a whole lot to do apart from teaching. So I kind of thought, all right, so if I'm going to be a teacher, I might as well try and enjoy the process and try and get better at it. So,
okay. And then did you take the traditional route? You were teaching, you were saying, oh, well, hold on here. This is not going to really, be good for my future. I'll need to get more qualifications and maybe go into university teaching. Is that the path you took?
Kind of. So I was a JET ALT for 3 years. And then Sendai had this kind of add-on program, because JET used to be 3 years only, right? It's 3 years and then you go home, basically. But Sendai hired me as a I guess privately hired ALT on the same conditions. And then about halfway through that 4th year, the ALT advisor for Miyagi left, and I applied for that job, even though I wasn't remotely qualified to do it. But I got it, and then that was a great kind of learning experience, because I was basically supervising like 150 ALTs and doing the training and doing lesson observations and things like that, which was fantastic in terms of development. Because obviously the best way to learn something is to teach it, and the best way to learn about teaching is to try and teach other people how to teach. So that was great. So I did that for 4 years, and then suddenly Miyagi decided to go with dispatch ALTs. So they didn't need an ALT advisor anymore. And they told me about November that I wouldn't have a job from April. And that was very, very stressful. And that was actually what started me thinking about money and personal finance.
Yeah, and that's the precarious nature of this industry, isn't it? It's kind of a general trend. I think speaking to people who've were working in a ELT, whether that be in universities, colleges, vocational schools in the 80s, it was, every year you just get a percentage increase, you pensioned, everything was, you had a tenure maybe, but then, things, the gig economy, neoliberalism kicked in, and it was all about
different planet now, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think even the salaries, the dispatch companies are keeping X percentage, and
the salary for JET is less now than it was 22 years ago.
Wow.
So it used to be 300,000 yen a month. That was our starting salary, and now I think it's 270. So it's
really?
gone down.
Wow. So 300,000, not so bad in Sendai, I think, or in the countryside. If you hadn't,
it didn't last me very long. I had really bad spending habits. I would run out of money every month before payday and be like, eating ramen and borrowing money from people. So
okay, we'll get into that in a little second. So you were working away, and then I was looking through your posts, and this is what kind of prompted me to get in touch, because you told me about the moment, and it's probably happening for some people out there. Well, it's definitely happening as we speak with Meta and Twitter laying off
the
people.
Tech industry is going through the same thing right now.
Yeah, people are being laid off, and also the general trend, as we said, over the past 10, 20 years has been, more dispatch agencies and gig and, less favorable contracts. But there's also been the pandemic and general, demographic changes in Japan as well. So I think for me and for a lot of friends, acquaintances, that, we had no problem picking up work as freelance teachers over the past few years. It's you don't get replies. I used to get replies, no problem. Get interview, talk to somebody. The agencies I worked with before say, "Oh, we have jobs coming up." I get emails, and I think speaking to friends, they say they send in CVs, resumes, and no responses for them. That's the nature of the industry. So getting on to what I was going to talk about was what is happening and happened to you, wasn't it? You were, what we would say, your contract was not renewed. And
this was in 2008. So, and obviously if you find out in November, it's a bit too late to find a new job from April, especially in somewhere like Sendai, which has kind of limited attractive job opportunities. So what I ended up doing was just finding enough part-time work, basically through having friends and connections that worked in universities. So I got, I think, 14 university classes a week, which is kind of a living wage. It's kind of 300,000 a month, more or less, from quite a busy work week. And I did that for a year, and then I was really lucky and found a full-time university position, which I did for 13 years until March this year, when again my contract was not renewed. Okay. Although I did have a bit more notice this time, and I basically transformed the way I approach personal finance, so that the first time was incredibly stressful and a huge shock, and the second time was fine. It's like, okay, maybe it's time to transition from full-time work, kind of thing.
Yeah, and the problem is the secondary effect, isn't it? So finances, it hurts marriage, doesn't it? Relationships become strained.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you've got all your normal issues, and then on top of that, you've got money issues. And if you can get rid of the money issues, it's not going to help you with anything else. It's not going to make you happy or anything, but you don't have that extra level of stress, which, yeah, I really recommend working on. Like, I think basically having fairly decent personal finance skills just makes life easier in every other aspect of it. If you've got a health problem, having money makes it easier to deal with your health problem. If you're married to someone, having enough money makes it easier to maintain that relationship, and so on and so on. Work-wise, if you've got a bit of a financial cushion, it gives you a bit more time to find a more suitable job, maybe, rather than rushing into the first one because you need to pay rent next month or whatever. So
exactly,
that's my main motivation for what I do, which is basically trying to help people learn about personal finance and kind of get themselves into a stronger financial position, because it just makes life better. So it's kind of like being one of those kind of annoying religious people that tries to convert everyone to their way. It's like I'm the same with money. So I'm like, I want everyone to be like this. So it's like being a missionary kind of thing.
Yeah, but you want people to keep their money, whereas the missionaries want to take your money, don't they?
Yes.
Their tithes or whatever. Yeah, or their shady schemes. But so was this really the Damascene moment? Was it? This was maybe like what the alcoholic says, like you hit bottom, really, 2008, and you never wanted to go through that experience again.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So tell me about before and after. You told me about 300,000. You'd be like scraping at the back of the couch or under the tatami at the end of the month. And so tell me about your habits back then, 2008, and what you learned for you personally. How you ended your ways.
It's a mindset more than anything else. It's kind of how you view money and things and value and stuff. So before I kind of got my act together, I just spend money. You'd get money and then you'd spend it, and this seemed very natural. And of course, and you're always thinking about the next thing that you want to buy. I was always thinking about, I want to get this car, or I want to get this camera, or I want to go on this holiday. And afterwards, I was like, okay, so I don't have the financial stability that would have protected us from this situation, and that's entirely my fault. So I kind of internalized that. I was like, okay, so being in this situation, I mean, the primary cause is that my employer decided not to renew my contract, but the real reason is that I wasn't sensible with my finances, and I wanted to change that. And then it kind of changed into, instead of buying stuff, I'd be buying security. So by investing, by saving, I'm making my life more secure. And then after a while, I realized that I didn't really miss the stuff very much. You know, you've got your exciting electronic gadget that you really wanted to buy and you finally bought. And then, 6 weeks later, it's not that exciting anymore. It just sits in the drawer. And I really kind of noticed that. And then the second thing was actually the earthquake. Because when we had the earthquake and we left all our stuff. We basically left our house as it was. Just took a couple of suitcases with us and took off, possibly forever. And that entire month we were away, I didn't really think about any of the stuff that we'd left behind. So that was really eye-opening as well. That was kind of a kind of minimalist kind of awakening. Maybe I don't need all this stuff, and maybe not having it will make me happier.
Yeah, so it's I think you quoted Marie Kondo, didn't you? It's about the minimalism,
Does it spark joy?
The essentialism. Yeah. I think I read a quote few days ago, and it said it was about being a millionaire or billionaire, whatever. And said the quote was, the only way, when you're a millionaire, the only way you can actually really feel that you're a millionaire is by spending money. So I don't I'm
agree with that at all.
Yeah, so I wanted to get your opinion on that, seeing as you were spending and then you had your moment of essentializing. So and buying things as well to fill our lives, fill some kind of void. As you say, it's some kind of mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my take on being a millionaire is when you can buy anything but choose not to, because you don't need it, or you don't value it, or it wouldn't improve your life. So that's my take on having enough money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the other quote. We have I think in this book I was reading, we have the opposite idioms, or the opposite, what would we say, sayings, don't we? A penny saved is a penny earned. And then you say you can't take it with you. We have like conflicting advice, don't we? I think there's one by Joseph Heller, wasn't it? He was asked a question, the author of Catch-22, and some fund manager said, I make more money in one day than you've done. Have you heard this one before?
Oh, yeah. It's a great quote.
And he said, what was it? Joseph Heller said, well, I'll have one thing you'll never have, and that is enough. So it's very much that kind of mindset, is it, you're talking of?
Yeah, and it's the stereotypical, Wall Street person who makes, I don't know about earns, makes, millions of dollars a year and then promptly goes out and spends it all on, showing off, basically. And how that basically probably isn't going to make them happy in the long run, because they're never going to have enough toys to compete with the person that has more toys than them, kind of thing. So yeah, it's much more satisfying to have control of your time. So for me, I would much rather have that freedom and that self-determination rather than, material stuff. Like, I don't have a car anymore. I used to have this K car, but it died on me last year, and I decided I didn't need to replace it. So that's a big expense gone. That wasn't actually improving my life. I find myself happier now that I walk everywhere. So it's just tweaking your life, not so much to reduce all your expenses, but rather to focus on what makes you happy and what's going to provide value for you in your life. So it's spending money on things that matter and not spending money on things that don't matter. And for a lot of people, I'm not sure they understand themselves enough to be able to make that distinction. I didn't understand myself until I got to, mid-30s or so.
Yeah. Well, it's a journey, isn't it? It's I don't know if we'll ever arrive totally. But it does make it easier in Japan that, your peer groups, that generally the culture is a frugal culture, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Anytime I go back to England, I'm from the UK. It's shocking. Like, I talk to my friends and the things that they think. I mean, the UK has always been huge about like houses, right? Like buying a house and doing up a house and buying another house and, you know, improving your house and the housing ladder and all that. And I don't recognize, I mean, obviously they're still my friends, but I don't recognize them in this, you know, it's so materialistic. And I think the US is even worse. The US is like 10 times that. But yeah, I do think Japan maybe has a slightly healthier view on that. Although Japan's not perfect either. You know, there's a lot of brand name kind of showing off, and you know, which school are your kids in, and you know, what kind of car you have, and there's a lot of that here as well. It's probably not as bad as maybe other countries are.
Yeah, I think in Japan they like money just as much as anybody, but they maybe pretend they don't. But secretly they'll tell you, yeah, of course. You know, it's like yes, we all want it, but yeah, it's the maybe for let's say, I don't know what the right way to put it, but let's say UK, Europe, America, for people who are more materialistic and they like to be ostentatious about it. But generally, like maybe the Japanese like a little bit of false modesty, don't they? So it's like, you know, I don't spend so much, but I actually, that makes me, you know, a better person than you.
I think that, they just show it in different ways, but yeah, it's not as full on, I think, here.
That's true.
And also, you know, Japan has had stagnant salaries. Like while I've been here, that 300,000 yen salary, when I started, that was a really good salary in the UK. And now it wouldn't be, because the UK's, you know, salaries have gone up for the last 22 years. You know, they've had, you know, they've had inflation, prices have gone up, salaries have gone up, whereas Japan's kind of stayed the same.
There's been some articles on that this week, hasn't there? I think the FT had, I've seen something shared, and a few others. I think that maybe Asahi picked up on it as well, the reports. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? I mean, everywhere. But, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the UK? I mean, that's a series of podcasts in itself. I don't know if salaries will continue to climb or in line with inflation, or what will happen. So, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to have good spending habits, good eating habits when you have advertising in your face for burgers and financial products and to buy beer and electronic gadgets, isn't it? I mean, it's living here in Tokyo, that's what it's in your face all day, every day. Whereas maybe our ancestors didn't have like burger signs when
no, and you'd make your own clothes and stuff.
Yes, exactly. A little bit like
it'd all be about utility.
Yes, exactly. And frugality. So tell me a little bit. So this was your mission then, to help others that, you know, maybe in a similar situation to you. And there's also, you know, the clock is ticking, isn't it? So you're, is it retirejapan.com? Did I get that correct?
It is, yeah.
Yes, yeah. I finally got one correct. But this is Ben Shearon, by the way. I said I would mention your name during the podcast as well, from retirejapan.com. So it has that sense of urgency, isn't it? You mentioned 30s, 40s, and we see, you know, our parents getting a little bit older, and, you know, our friends. And then, you know, retirement is not so far away, is it? It's a reality. And maybe some of us regret not, you know, being more organized in our 20s when we were told. So this is what prompted you really to start retirejapan.com, is it? These factors?
Kind of.
Yeah.
The actual trigger for it was, you know, obviously I was on my own little journey of self-improvement and learning. But I didn't have Retire Japan. I didn't have any thoughts of doing Retire Japan. What actually started Retire Japan was I was talking to a friend of mine who's also a teacher in Japan, long-term teacher, really the nicest guy you'd ever meet, fantastically lovely guy. And he was telling me about his retirement plans and how he was preparing for retirement. Basically, he had met one of these advisors that hang around Tokyo and, you know, target English teachers.
Yeah,
and,
I know
sell
what
them
you're talking
financial
about,
products.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the product that he'd been sold was this kind of overseas, offshore savings investment wrapped plan thing, insurance wrapper. And it's just horrendous, like the fees and the kind of returns he was getting, and he was just being milked by this advisor who basically the business model for these advisors that go out and target people is a commission. So they give you free financial advice, and they persuade you to buy some product, and they get an enormous commission when you sign on the dotted line. And that's why these products have really punitive redemption penalties for the first few years. So if you cash it in within the first 2 or 3 years, you basically get nothing back because all your money has already gone to the advisor for those, the first couple of years worth of payments. And just after talking to him, I was so angry that, people were taking advantage of my friend like this, that I went home and I registered the site and I wrote the first blog post that day. And that's where Retire Japan came from. So it was kind of like, okay, so I realized there's a whole bunch of people in Japan like me who needed information in English, because it's out there in Japanese, but even in Japanese, it's not easy to find all the relevant information. So especially, I think, non-Japanese residents, a lot of them are not comfortable reading Japanese, especially reading about finance in Japanese. And so I thought, maybe if I shared this information in English, I could help some people and prevent them from falling victim to I want to be clear, it's not a scam, but it's a very unfavorable product, and you probably shouldn't be choosing that product if you knew about all your alternatives.
Yeah, as I was told by a previous guest that if you have to pay for a financial product or if they come to you, they're making the money, you're not. Generally,
yeah. If someone's incentivized to go out and get new customers, then there's a reason for that, right?
But the flip side to that is that we have to take the initiative and go out and look. But that's what your blog posts, what your product, what you do is you make that a little bit easier for us to find this information that may be hidden or barely comprehensible, and it's financial jargon. No matter what language it's in, it's not immediately accessible, is it, to the layperson?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think the problem is that no one's making money from giving you simple, effective advice, right? Because there's no money in that. So they make money by selling you complicated financial products. So there's no incentive to go out there and give people, straightforward information. So that's the main issue, I think. It's actually really easy. So personal finance is really, really easy. But no one really gets that. It seems complicated. The image we see on TV and movies and things, it makes it look really difficult and time consuming, but it isn't. It's incredibly easy. So
that's a rule of advertising, isn't it? They say you should make the simple the easy things look hard and the hard things look easy. That's so that's generally so behind all the verbiage and the legalese and the jargon, it's the essentials are really there. And what essentials are there about saving money? So it's the Mr. Macabre, you just basically
yes
you have more in and spend less, and that's it.
Don't spend money you don't have. I mean, basically it's try and make as much money as you can, and spend as little as you can without making your life unpleasant. You don't want to be unhappy. You don't want to sit at home like eating eating lentils all day. But there's a happy medium somewhere. And ideally, you'll be making more than you spend. And then if you save and invest the difference, you'll probably be okay. And that's it.
So you mentioned this in one of your posts, and I think it was it's famously the Susie Orman approach, wasn't it, on the Oprah show? If you're familiar, you probably for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, I know who she is, but I don't know the approach. So go on.
So she was the first I heard about the latte. So if you don't drink your latte every day, you cut down on your discretionary spending. But you said in one of your posts that that's not the approach. It's the fixed costs, isn't it, that you should look at?
Well, I mean, it's so personal. So, if having a coffee in the morning makes you really happy, then of course you should do that. So it's about being realistic, but there's got to be somewhere where you can probably reduce your spending. And the most effective way to do that is to reduce your fixed costs, right? Your housing costs, your transport costs, switching your mobile phone provider. When the market was liberalized a few years ago, I switched from SoftBank to Eon Mobile, the supermarket. They have their own mobile thing. So
I changed to EQ,
UQ, that's another big one. Yeah. So, but my bill went from 9,000 yen a month to 2,000 yen a month, and my life didn't change. So, like that, finding that kind of saving, and of course, that's every single month going forward, right? So that's a really effortless way to save if you can optimize things like that. Things like canceling subscriptions that you're not actually using. You've got all these subscriptions that you probably don't even remember. But if you went through your credit card statement or your bank statement, you'd be like, okay, so actually I'm not using that. So if I cancel it, that's a little bit less spending every month. That isn't affecting my happiness.
And renegotiating. So I think you mentioned in another one of your posts about running your... So we could talk about that, is running your personal finances and your business finances. The same approach for both, or is there a different? The fundamentals are the same.
I guess so. The thing about business, though, is that often you're spending money to, improve your product or make sure that your employees are happier, or there's the different. I mean, I guess personal spending is the same. You're spending money to improve your happiness or make your life better, kind of thing. So, yeah, I guess it's similar. Yeah, I tend to have a slightly positive view of things in the I think there's a minimalist view where you're like, okay, I've got to save all the money, and then there's the positive view where you're like, okay, so maybe I can make more money. So there's two approaches, right? You spend less or you earn more. But if you can earn more, that's kind of infinite. You can always earn more money, but there's only so much you can cut before you make yourself ill or unhappy. So I would tend to tell people, if you're not making enough, then you should focus on earning more. And if you're making lots but not saving, then you should focus on cutting down on your spending. So it kind of depends on where you're starting from.
And renegotiating your with suppliers, isn't it? I mean, I think I read this a few years back, and one of my email provider, I'm sure you use maybe MailChimp or Aweber or one of those. Do you?
I use Aweber, yeah.
Aweber, yeah. So because I get your emails on Monday morning, so the Monday morning read. This is Ben Shearon from retiredjapan.com, just to get your name in again. But you look at the open rates, how many people open, and if you have more than 10,000 or 5,000, you're charged more money. But actually, there's a lot of people are inactive, aren't they? And you can just delete those and be on a lower rate. You can save yourself $50 a month just by doing that. Also, when I worked for a telephone company, very similar to what you talked about, is that a lot of times, and you're not supposed to tell customers this, but if customers ask, they're on like old billing, or they have rental for services that were no longer needed, or renting telephones. Remember when they used to do that? So if you renegotiate, if you call up your telephone company or utility and say, am I on am I on an old billing program here, or can you put me to a newer one? Something like that. Can you give any more examples?
Actually, do you know Ramit Sethi?
I do.
He wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
That's right.
Which has the scammiest book title I've ever heard, but it's actually a really good book. And a lot of what he talks about is that he's actually got scripts in there to negotiate with your bank or your mobile phone company. So that's a fantastic resource for learning about that. Okay. I do find that Japan's not as flexible with it, though. In the UK and the US, you probably can do this. I tend to find companies in the UK, at least, have awful customer service. Like 2 or 3 times now, I've had a problem with a company that would have been pretty simple for them to fix upfront. But rather than doing that, they chose to like ignore me for like 5 or 6 months, and then you end up threatening them with, legal action and the ombudsman and stuff, and then they make it right. But the strategy is, if you do that, then 90% of people give up. So that's the approach. Whereas in Japan, I find customer service is better, but they're not willing or able to negotiate or give refunds or discounts or change your conditions. So it's kind of a give and take there. I quite like the Japanese model, but it is more difficult to get things like your fees reduced by complaining. They tend to be like, okay, I'm sorry, that's not on the script. So
yeah. It's a little bit more rigid, isn't it? But yeah, that's bringing back bad memories of customer service. And having worked in customer service and being a customer, it's the hassle factor, isn't it? If you ring a call center and you're always in the queue and they're not resolving the tickets, it was like, just get this guy. He's ruining our stats here. So just get rid of this guy or pay him off or do something. But the other end is. They put that wall up, don't they, of pain?
Yeah,
so that you won't call back.
Which seems insane to me. Like I would think that you'd do better by treating your customers well, and then you wouldn't have to pay them compensation. The ones that persist. But I guess they've run the numbers, and if they do this and 90% of people give up, and you compensate the other 10%, then maybe the bottom line improves or something. But I would have thought the reputational damage would nullate that, but no, maybe not.
There was a case a few months back, wasn't there? I saw it on Twitter. Somebody's father had died, and they kept. I think it was Vodafone made.
Oh God, yeah. Awful,
that was awful
stories.
Yeah, and they wouldn't relent, would they? They just, we keep billing. But then on Twitter, that's the good thing about Twitter, I suppose, is these cases can be heard, can't they?
You can amplify it, yeah.
And so many more people piled in with their stories of bad customer service. So that makes it a lot worse. So so tell me a little bit about investing in Japan and how you can be more, what would we say, wise with your money, and things like double taxation treaties and pensions agreements between. Is there any nasty surprises people could get, or how to safeguard their
the main nasty surprise is for Americans, because the way America approaches taxation is you're taxed on the basis of your citizenship. So if you're an American citizen, you have to file a US tax return. I think everyone knows that. But they might not know that the IRS rules means that it's really difficult to invest in Japan if you're an American citizen. You can, and often you can open the account and invest, but then later you find out that you're in all sorts of trouble with the IRS. So the easiest thing for Americans is just not to bother and just use a US broker to invest. And then you've got lots of advice in English about investing in America. For everyone else, Japan's a fantastic place to invest. It's actually really easy. There's all sorts of accounts you can use. The tax paperwork is minimal to zero, and the products are actually quite competitive. So the fees are very low. You can get some really good investment products. So Japan is a fantastic place to invest as long as you have a rough idea of what you want to do.
So I saw you posting also about Ninkin, the state pension. So tell me a little bit about that. A lot of people have this perception that, the demographic time bomb, Japan is going to run out of money, going to have no savings, it's going to default, and financial Armageddon is going to happen in 20 years. But please disabuse me of that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the starting point for this discussion has to be that Ninkin is not optional. It's compulsory. So you have to enroll in Nenkin and pay Nenkin. So, a lot of people seem to I mean, every time I post about this, I get people saying, yeah, it's not compulsory. My friend doesn't pay. I'm like, okay, so your friend's breaking the law. The problem with Nenkin is for years, certain employers, especially in the teaching industry, have tried to weasel out of their obligation to provide their employees with, social insurance, including pensions and healthcare. So the government's slowly cracking down on this. I wish they'd crack down a lot harder and faster, but they're slowly doing it. So most people now get, pension and health insurance through their work. People that don't, so this would be freelancers or part-time workers or people who have a small company, maybe. They should be paying in through City Hall, but sometimes they don't. And again, Japan's not quite enforcing this as strictly as for it's completely locked down, and everyone is paying the way they should. But more importantly, I think for the individual, if you don't have a state pension, what's your plan? Because you get to, and you run into people and they're like, yeah, I'll just work for the rest of my life. I'm like, okay, what if you can't? What if people don't hire you because you're too old, or, maybe they don't, your job category maybe gets phased out. And what if you get ill? What if you're sick? What if, there's all sorts of things that could happen. I would much rather have the pension and not need it than need the pension and not have it, right? So I think that's the starting point there. And, I think, a state pension is... I can't see any scenarios where the Japanese government said, hey, we're not going to pay your pensions anymore, because they wouldn't be the Japanese government the next day, right? They'd be gone. So also there's an enormous Japan pension fund. It's the largest in the world. And that's there to support Nenkin going forward. So I think in terms of the system, we'll probably see premiums go up, slowly over time, and then we'll probably see the retirement age move back, like all countries are basically doing now. Because when retirement ages were decided, the average lifespan was about 60. So you retire at 60 and you probably die around 60. And now, the average lifespan for a 60-year-old is into the 90s, right? So obviously something has to give, right? Either the system changes or, but the other thing about Nenkin is that it's a very minimal income. If you're paying Kokumin Nenkin, your maximum pension payout is 65,000 yen a month, which is kind of enough to buy food, maybe. So obviously that's not enough. So you also, on top of paying Nenkin, which I think everyone should do, obviously, you also need to make your own provision. So you need to save up and invest. The government released a paper a couple of years ago that said that the average married couple receiving Nenkin is also going to need between 20 and 30 million yen in savings just to maintain their lifestyle. And then they withdrew that report about a week later because everyone went nuts. They were like, what? But that's the reality. Basically, if you expect to maintain a reasonable kind of middle-class lifestyle, then the public pension is not going to be enough. You also need to save up and invest.
I would imagine, but please enlighten me that, in UK, Europe, America, there's equity release, isn't there? Or asset release, where you can sell your house or maybe downsize. But, the Japanese housing market in the countryside is not so hot, is it? There's famously so many free houses. So that's not really an option for people, is it? Or am I wrong?
Oh, I think real estate is different in Japan. So a lot of countries, the expectation or the history of real estate is that prices go up. So you buy a house and the price goes up. And, when you're older, this is an asset. In Japan, a house is basically where you live, and buildings depreciate over time. So the land might go up in value, but the building is basically depreciates to zero or minus, because at the end of its lifespan, its useful lifespan, you have to pay to demolish the building. So having a really old building on a piece of land reduces the value of the land, because you have to pay 1 million, 2 million yen to demolish the building. So So yeah, that's not really an option. So the way I look at real estate in Japan in terms of buying a home is buying a home is cheaper than renting. So you'll pay less in mortgage than you would in equivalent rent. And you'll get a nicer place. Right. Yeah. So a home that you buy is generally going to be a higher quality than the home that you rent, because rental properties are built to a lower standard. But this is the really important but. There's very little flexibility. So it's difficult to move. It's expensive to move. Every time you buy and sell a house, you're going to pay between 7 and 10% in fees. So obviously you don't want to be doing that very often. And plus the building depreciates. So generally you want to rent in the short term, or if you're not sure, and then you want to buy if you've decided that you're going to stay somewhere. And you'll have a home for the rest of the time you live there. But it's not an asset. And there are reverse mortgages in Japan, but again, they're not a great deal because they're based on the value of the home, which has gone down, presumably. So that's not the answer, basically.
That's not the answer. It's not something we can rely on here in Japan. I was just come back to the fees they charge. Is that conveyancing fees, estate agent fees, stamp duty? Are those?
It's all that.
Yeah.
So it's the estate agent's the big one, and then there's registration and checks and things. So
okay, yeah,
and of course that's all based on the price. So.
Yes.
So, it's a big chunk of change if you're doing that every couple of years, basically.
Yeah, and finding a buyer, maybe is that
depends where you are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in Sendai, maybe different to inner city Tokyo. So, besides the Nenkin, we've ruled out real estate as an investment, but we've said that you said that to buy a house is obviously cheaper to pay and higher quality, so maybe consider that. Is there what offered by the insurance companies, by the banks, how should you allocate your assets? Is it the 3-pot strategy, or
I'm a big fan of the stock market. So investing passively in the stock market by buying diversified index fund. So an index fund is basically something that buys, hundreds of different companies in one fund. And you want a low cost one where you're not paying very much in fees. And you want it diversified. So you probably want a worldwide stock fund. If you buy that in a tax exempt account, so you don't have to pay tax on the profits, and you leave it there for 20, 30 years, then you'll probably do quite well, I think. And it's a very easy, low time strategy. Once you've set it up, it's automated, and you just, every month you invest a little bit and it grows over time. And that's what most people should be doing. So there's different accounts in Japan. There's something called NISA, which is an investment account. And then there's something called IDECO, which is a self-managed pension investment account. And most people should be trying to maximize those two. And if they did that for 20 years, they'd be fine. They'd have plenty of money to rely on in retirement.
Okay, it's as simple as that. I actually before, yeah, but I'm sure there's more to it. And if you go to Ben's blog, retiredjapan.com, you can definitely find out. And of course, so tell me a little bit about the services you offer. Is it seminars, coaching, one-to-one advice? What do you do?
Well, I think most of the site is, I kind of approached it as a public service. So I really just want to help people. And all the information you need is publicly available. So there's blog posts, there's some kind of simple guides. There's a forum, which is really, really helpful. If you've got a question, just jump on the forum. It's a very friendly and helpful place. But, obviously there's also, like, we write a couple of guides. We got a couple of ebooks that you can buy, and that will basically save you a bit of time. So rather than reading through, a few blog posts and trying to find forum threads, you can just buy the ebook and read a kind of curated, concise version. I do one-on-one coaching. So that's mainly the main people I talk to are people who either have no idea where to start and they want a bit of kind of a push, as it were, or they know exactly what to do, but they just want someone to confirm that that's correct and they haven't missed anything. So those are the two main types of coaching clients I have. And the coaching's kind of one-off. It's a one-off session where, we talk about whatever you want to talk about and I can answer your questions and maybe suggest a couple of things. I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't give advice or sell you products or anything. I can just kind of talk things through and refer you to bits of information. And then this year I started a course. So we're just about to finish the first cohort of the course. It's a live course, so with a bunch of people, we kind of go through 6 lectures with homework and so on. And it's called Your First 10 Million Yen. And the goal of the course is to set you up so that you can save and invest your way to 10 million yen. And the reason I chose that number rather than any other number is that 10 million yen it's small enough to be achievable, I think, but it's big enough to be significant. And the thing is, once you get to 10 million yen, you're going to find it quite easy to go much further. But getting that first chunk is where all the learning is going to happen. So in the process of doing that, you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about investing. You're going to learn about, different accounts and what you need to do. And that's going to set you up for future success. So that's been really fun, actually. It's the current cohort, there's only 20 people in it. So it's been really interesting to work through them with this.
It's interesting what you said about the 10,000. I think, I can't remember, it was some financial guru or maybe successful entrepreneur I read sometime in the past said the first 100,000 is the hardest, but then millions and millions are easy. Is something similar to that? Is that tell me?
I think that was Charlie Munger. Yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it is because once, saving up that first bit, going from zero to 10 million, for example. You have to learn what you need to do. You have to start doing it. You have to, fix your lifestyle, maybe spend a bit less, try to earn a bit more. And then you reach that goal. And then after that, you just have to continue. And also it's kind of reinforcing. So once you get some momentum going, you get more motivated. Maybe you try and save a bit more money. You try and put a bit more away. It's very much a virtuous circle. So it's self-reinforcing. So, for us, looking back at our accounts, we started, 2008 or so, very, very slowly, but it accelerates, because you're making compound interest. If you look at a compound interest graph, the curve gets steeper and steeper the more time passes. So by the end of the, journey or whatever, the returns on your investments are bigger than the amounts you're putting in each year. And that's incredibly motivating. I mean, a couple of years ago, our portfolio started growing by multiples of my salary, which was incredibly, that really makes you kind of commit even more to the process, I think. But it's just that first getting started and getting all your systems in place. That's the really important step. And most people never do it. People read about it and think about it and think, oh, I really should start, thinking about my finances, but they don't do it. And unless you do it, it doesn't happen. So that's the motivate, the thinking behind that there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the fact that I think a lot of people, they think that investing is kind of dour and it's kind of ascetic thing that you're going to, you're going to deny yourself, isn't it? It's the same for maybe fitness and diet as well, isn't it?
Almost exactly the same as fitness. And sadly, I struggle to work on my fitness. I find the money bit quite easy after a while, but the fitness, I still struggle to be consistent and sort the habits out. So, but it's the same. Everyone basically knows what to do. It's just difficult to make yourself do it.
Exactly. So I'm talking today to Ben Shearon from retirejapan.com. Ben, we're an hour in, so I think we'll kind of close it down there. I think there's been some fantastic advice from Ben. All the the links will be in the show notes because Ben is going to kindly send them over to me.
Ooh, I will.
Yeah, no hurry. But I was going to ask you some questions about, the 5 personal finance myths from Forbes, but actually, I don't think anybody believes these myths. It's like, a retirement plan before 40 is too early. It's like
nonsense.
Yeah.
The sooner you start, the easier it is. So, I mean, right now in Japan, there's something called a junior NISA account. And you can open an investment account for your kids. This actually is going to finish at the end of next year. So there's only 1 year left in the plan. But yeah, I mean, if you opened an account for your kids and you put some money away, by the time they're 20, it's probably quadrupled, right? If you look at kind of likely growth in the stock market. And it's going to continue from there, right? So if they leave it until they're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, you can actually save enough for their retirement just by putting a small amount of money away now and letting it compound for 60 years. So yeah, that's nonsense, basically.
You need a lot of money to invest. I'm sure this
in Japan, you can start investing from 100 yen. So that's how much money you need to buy a mutual fund. So yeah, no.
You don't need emergency liquidity. Who believes these things?
It depends. Well, I mean,
really?
It depends. I mean, for example, let's say that every month you save 70% of your income. Right, you only need 30% of your salary to live on. Then that's your emergency liquidity, because you could always choose not to invest that 70% and use it for whatever emergency comes up. So it depends. But yeah, it's a good idea to have some cash put aside to help you deal with problems. So
great. It's been great chatting to you today, Ben. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I hope it wasn't too random. Like we kind of went all over the place today, didn't we? So
we did, but that's me more than you, I think. Yeah, that's my style. So thanks again, Ben.
Thanks for listening to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast with Philip Pound. For more great advice and resources, check out eflmagazine.com. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.